Alright, hello again. For this video, I'm going to show you just some watercolor pencils and mixture of like watercolors with the watercolor pencils. So you should have a box of these if you're in Art 2. The Art 3s, fortunately and unfortunately, you don't have the watercolor pencils, you have the regular colored pencils, but you have more variety of colors for your project. So again, this is more so for like the Art Nouveau. You can experiment, however, with like painting and then adding watercolor on top with the other color pencils that the Art 3s and 4s have. All right. But anyways, I started with this image or this portrait. My niece. So she has more of like a peach tone to her complexion. Sorry, it gets a little bit blue on this camera or from the phone. So I just started with, on this side, I used again that color chart I've been talking about. It's just the one right here, the skin tone, lip color, color mixing reference, those slides. I was using this chart here, which is this one. So I used more of like the peach tones, which is just orange with water here. The 16, so it's just this one. All I did was put some orange here and then just added water to it. And that's how I got that color. All right. But I wanted to show you just trying out the colors. So this one's a light orange. Again, I'm still going to test it. Use it on the scratch paper. Light orange. I'm going to try this yellow orange. Yellow orange looks a little bright. If your person has a very light or kind of more like a peach tone, you can use something like a magenta or the red and just go very lightly. I think for this one, I'll start with the light orange. If their skin's kind of tan too, you can use the brown and just go in lightly. Might be a little dark. Sorry for the focus issue. That was like a brown and this is like a dark brown. But I'm going to start with this light orange. One way of doing it is just laying in a light layer. Oh, also just make sure it says watercolor on it. If you start filling it in and it's like a Crayola or it's a different color pencil, it's not going to work. So again, make sure they say watercolor. So I'm going to do this quickly. You can do it a little slower, more methodical, just so it's a little bit cleaner. Just go a little faster. All right, but I have my layer there. Sorry for the focus issue. So again, I use the light orange colored watercolor colored pencil there. And then all I have to do is just dip my brush in water. Make sure it doesn't have any paint on it. And then as I brush it around, it just activates the color and it just works kind of like watercolor. So again, I would have gone like a little slower with the shading just so you don't see any of the lines. Most of them are pretty blended though. Oh, and I didn't show you to test them, but you can also test them if I have sketched the colors out and then just go over it with your wet brush. And you can see what colors they turn into. Brush. So it's like the magenta. Looks more like a pink. Brush. It's kind of like the maroonish brown. That's the regular brown. Sorry, so you can see all the colors. Again, you can try them out. All I did was use the colored pencil, drew a little part, and then with the wet brush, just paint right on top of it. So again, in this one, you can see the bottom part is getting pretty smooth. The top part's still kind of scratchy of where I just sketched that in. And the colors do show up differently than the watercolor set. So again, make sure you try them out first. The colored pencils are a good tool also, just in case from this palette, if you're missing any colors, you can always use a colored pencil. Fill in an area and it works just like the watercolor, the similar consistency. Other things you can do after you blend it is just add more watercolor on top. So I look at this image. I can start filling in some of these slightly darker tones. And I would go with one of your browns. So that one has a little more red in it. I'm going to go with kind of the regular brown. Shadow here. This is also good for details. If there's any fine little lines in the image. This is the part I painted with this set, the watercolor. You can also draw on top of that. Some shadow there on her nostril. Oh, the other part too. Also, if you have a lot of, it's looking really sketchy, make sure you just clean up the lines a little bit before you paint it. Sorry, I should have mentioned that earlier too. But I have this brown. Go back in on this side too. And then again, same thing. Just grabbing a little bit of water with a clean brush. Brushing it on the end so it's not too wet. And then I can paint right over that brown. So you can see I started to add a shadow underneath her glasses. I can make the nostrils smoother. Just be careful not to brush it, obviously too big because it'll get all over the place. So you can see how it's getting. A lot of people do like to paint like the base layer first with these kinds of watercolors. So they'll paint it like peach using like the light, very light orange, and then they'll do the watercolor on top. People like this way better just because if you're just sketching out with just like the colored pencil first and then painting on top, sometimes you get like little white spots in between. So I usually like this method better as well. So I mean, I could just continue detailing it out. This is a good method to get more control. And again, the main thing is just to let it dry. So if I wanted to add more darker values on top of this brown, I'd let it dry first and then add more on top. So it's just a little bit of colored pencils. You can also blend colors, like if I wanted yellow, say like a background, and I wanted to add some orange to make it kind of yellow orange. I can do that, and then again just blend it with a brush here. Just be careful if you're using darker colors, like if it was a yellow and like a black or blue. I'd try to push the yellow into the darker color. Right. Those are a few tips for the watercolor pencils.